My husband told his mother, "I'm leaving her. I can't live with a woman who earns less than me." I agreed to everything he wanted. A month later his lawyer called him, his voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" he asked. My husband froze. He finally understood what I'd never said. "You need to start looking for a real job, Kelly. I can't keep telling people my wife is just a bookkeeper." Scott stood in our kitchen holding his promotion letter, waving it like evidence in a court case he'd already won. Behind him, through the window, I could see the sunrise hitting the apartment building I'd bought through my LV, the one he didn't know about. My new director salary means we're in a different league now. Harrison's wife just made partner at her firm. Chen's wife runs a medical practice. Mine does other people's taxes. Before we continue, I want to thank you for listening to stories that reveal hidden truths. If you believe that real worth isn't measured by titles but by actual contributions, please consider subscribing. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this. I set down my coffee mug, the one from the accounting conference where I'd given the keynote speech last year. Scott had thought I was attending a weekend workshop for small business bookkeepers. In reality, I'd been presenting my framework for corporate restructuring to 200 CFOs. "Director salary," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "That's wonderful. How much is the raise?" 15%, he said, his chest puffing out. "Brings me to 120 base, plus bonuses." He said it like he'd just announced he'd won the Nobel Prize. $120,000. Last month alone, my consulting fee from the Steinberg Industries restructure was double that, but Scott didn't know about Steinberg Industries. He didn't know about any of my Fortune 500 clients. The promotion letter was dated 3 days ago. He'd been carrying it around, waiting for the perfect moment to make his announcement, to draw his line in the sand. I watched him fold it carefully and place it on the counter between us, a barrier made of corporate letterhead and misplaced pride. "We should celebrate," I said, already knowing how this conversation would end. "Giovanni's? Like our anniversary?" His face twisted slightly. "About that. The anniversary dinner." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Look at this. Harrison took his wife to the French Laundry last month. Posted the whole thing. That's the kind of place someone in my position should be seen at. Not some neighborhood Italian place where you wear the same dress every year. The black dress. He'd noticed after all. What he hadn't noticed was that I wore it because it was the dress from our first date, a sentimental choice that apparently meant nothing to him now. He also hadn't noticed that I'd paid for our anniversary dinner with my business credit card, just like I'd paid for every special occasion dinner for the past 4 years. "Maybe we could go somewhere nicer next time," I offered, knowing there wouldn't be a next time. The way he was standing, the way his eyes kept sliding away from mine, told me he'd already made his decision. "That's the thing, Kelly." He put his phone down and looked at me directly for the first time. "There's an image I need to maintain now. The other directors, their wives, they're different. They contribute equally. They're partners in success. You're still doing the same bookkeeping work you were doing when we met 7 years ago." I almost laughed. The same work. If only he knew that my little bookkeeping job had evolved into Hamilton Financial Services, a consulting firm with 3 Fortune 500 companies on retainer. If only he knew that while he was struggling to make senior analyst, I was restructuring accounting departments for companies whose CEOs he could only dream of meeting. "Your mother called yesterday," I said, changing the subject slightly. "She's still coming for Sunday lunch?" "Actually, about that." Scott picked up his coffee, the coffee I'd made him with beans from the specialty roaster that cost $30 a pound. "She had some thoughts about us. About our situation." "Our situation?" Patricia Hoffman had been having thoughts about our situation since the day Scott introduced me as a bookkeeper. She'd looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on expensive furniture. Something unfortunate that needed to be dealt with eventually. "She thinks I'm being held back," Scott continued. "That I could be moving faster in my career if I had the right kind of support at home. Someone who understands the corporate world. Someone who can host dinner parties and network with the right people." "I understand the corporate world," I said quietly. "Kelly, you balance books for dentists and dry cleaners. That's not the same as understanding high-level business strategy. Last week, I'd saved a pharmaceutical company $40 million by identifying redundancies in their accounting structure. The week before that, I'd helped a tech startup prepare for an IPO that would value them at $2 billion. But Scott thought I spent my days entering receipts for small businesses. He walked over to the window looking out at the view that my consulting fees had paid for. I'm 35 years old. This promotion is just the beginning. In 5 years I could be VP. In 10 maybe C-suite. But I need the right partner for that journey. And I'm not the right partner because I'm a bookkeeper? Because you lack ambition, Kelly. You're content with mediocrity. You've never pushed yourself to be more. I thought about the 14-hour days I'd pulled last month during the Morrison Industries audit, an audit that had uncovered fraud and saved them from bankruptcy. I thought about the certification courses I'd completed online at night while Scott watched sports, each one adding another specialization to my consulting offerings. I thought about the network of CFOs and controllers who had my personal cell phone number and called me when they needed problems solved that their internal teams couldn't handle. You're right, I said finally. I should probably think about my future. Scott turned from the window, relief visible on his face. He thought I was agreeing with him, that I was accepting his assessment of my worth. I'm glad you understand. This isn't easy for me either, but sometimes we have to make difficult choices for growth. The morning sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across our kitchen. In 2 hours, I had a video call with the Morgan Group about their expansion into European markets. They wanted my input on structuring their accounting departments across multiple countries with different tax laws. The consulting fee for that project alone would be more than Scott's new director salary, but he'd never know that. He'd already decided who I was and what I was worth, and nothing I said would change that valuation in his mind. 3 days after Scott's promotion announcement, I was carrying dirty coffee cups from his home office when I heard Patricia's voice through his laptop speakers. He'd left his video call running while grabbing documents from the printer, assuming I wouldn't pay attention to his mother's weekly check-in. The Thursday morning calls had become routine. Patricia calling from her spotless Connecticut kitchen, Scott updating her on his career victories while I supposedly worked in the other room. Did you tell her yet? Patricia's voice carried that particular tone of anticipation, like someone waiting for gossip at her country club. I stopped in the doorway, holding the cups Scott had left scattered across his desk from late-night work sessions. Through the laptop screen, I could see Patricia leaning forward, her pearl necklace catching the light from her kitchen's bay window. Scott returned to his desk, settling into his ergonomic chair, the one I'd bought him for his birthday when he complained about back pain. I brought up the career incompatibility issue. Laid the groundwork. Groundwork. Patricia's laugh was sharp. Scott, darling, you're a director now. You can't keep dragging dead weight. How much longer are you going to pretend that having a bookkeeper for a wife is acceptable? Dead weight. The phrase hung in the air while I stood frozen, gripping Scott's World's Best Husband mug, the one I'd given him our 3rd anniversary when I still believed the words. I know, Mom. I'm handling it. Scott ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture I recognized from 7 years of watching him struggle with difficult decisions. Harrison Blackwood comes highly recommended. Met with him last week. The lawyer from the billboards? Good choice. Aggressive representation for high earners, right? Exactly. He says with the income disparity, I'm in a strong position. Kelly makes maybe $40,000 a year doing those little bookkeeping jobs. My new salary puts me at 3 times that. The documentation is clear. I watched my knuckles turn white around the ceramic handle. 40,000. That's what he thought Hamilton Financial Services brought in. Last month alone, I'd billed 90,000 to the Morrison Group for restructuring their European operations. You deserve someone equal to your success, Patricia continued. When I think about Harrison's wife, she just made partner at Crawford and Associates. Or that lovely Dr. Kim that Marcus married. These are women who contribute equally, who understand ambition. That's exactly my point, Scott agreed, his voice taking on that performative quality he used in office presentations. I can't show up to corporate events with someone who doesn't understand basic business strategy. Last week's dinner with the executives? Kelly spent 20 minutes talking to the CFO's wife about recipe organization. Recipe organization, Mom. I remembered that conversation differently. Margaret Chin, the CFO's wife, had been discussing her daughter's startup, a meal planning app that needed back-end financial structuring. I'd given her my card, the one for Hamilton Financial Services. She'd called yesterday to set up a consultation. When are you filing? Patricia's question was matter-of-fact, like asking about dinner plans. Soon. I need to organize the assets first. Document everything clearly. The apartment, the investment accounts, the savings. I've been the primary contributor to all of it. Well, of course you have. What has she contributed? Basic bookkeeping while you built a real career. The irony is she thinks she's helping by managing our finances, Scott laughed. She has no idea I've been tracking everything separately. Building my case. I backed away from the door silently, still carrying the cups, my mind processing what I'd just heard like analyzing a balance sheet for irregularities. They'd been planning this. While I was working 16-hour days to finish the Steinberg audit, Scott and his mother had been strategizing my disposal. Later that afternoon while Scott was at his office, the one where he was supposedly a director, I found myself searching for something in our bedroom closet. His gym bag had been shoved behind winter coats, which was odd since he claimed to work out every Tuesday and Thursday. Underneath it, wrapped in a plastic folder from OfficeMax, were printed pages from law firm websites. Blackwood and Associates featured prominently, with certain phrases highlighted in yellow. Protecting high earners, maximizing asset retention, strategic documentation of financial disparity. Behind the printouts was a handwritten list in Scott's neat printing. 2 columns, his and hers. Under his column, the apartment listed at $800,000. The investment portfolio at $200,000. The BMW. The savings account. Under my column, 2008 Honda Civic valued at $4,000. Personal checking account, estimated at $2,000. Bookkeeping equipment. My laptop. $500. He'd been inventorying our life like a business liquidation, except his calculations were based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The apartment wasn't ours. It belonged to Hamilton Financial Services, the LLC I'd established 2 years before our wedding. The investment portfolio was managed under my financial advisory license. Even the BMW was leased through my company as a business vehicle. Scott's name appeared on things as an authorized user, a courtesy I'd extended that he'd mistaken for ownership. I photographed every page with my phone, then returned everything exactly as I'd found it. The gym bag went back behind the coats at the same angle. The folder maintained its slight bend from being pressed against the wall. Scott would never know I'd seen his battle plans. That evening I made dinner while Scott worked late, or said he was working late. Salmon with asparagus, his favorite. He came home at 9, kissed my forehead absently and praised the meal while scrolling through his phone. I watched him eat food I'd prepared in the kitchen I'd renovated with my consulting bonuses, sitting at the table I'd purchased from a client who was liquidating assets, and I felt like an anthropologist observing a species I'd misidentified for years. Good day? I asked, maintaining the routine. Productive, he said. Very productive. Had a meeting about future transitions. Transitions. Even his vocabulary had shifted to corporate speak, sanitizing the personal into the professional. I wondered if Harrison Blackwood had coached him on that too. How to distance yourself linguistically from the spouse you were about to discard. That night, after Scott had fallen asleep, I sat in the living room with my laptop and pulled up the incorporation documents for Hamilton Financial Services. Page after page of legal structure I'd carefully built before saying I do, never imagining I'd need the protection but understanding that good bookkeepers always maintain clean records and clear boundaries. The apartment purchase agreement showing Hamilton Financial Services as the buyer. The investment account documentation, opened under my LLC's EIN number. Even our joint checking account was technically a business account with Scott listed as an authorized signer, not an owner. I'd spent 7 years letting Scott believe he was the primary breadwinner because it seemed to matter so much to his sense of self. Now I understood that silence had been interpreted as confirmation of his superiority. He'd mistaken my discretion for inability, my quiet competence for lack of ambition. The man sleeping in our bed, my bed really, had built an entire narrative around a financial fiction that was about to become very, very real for him. The next morning I woke at 5:15 a.m. and started what would become my new routine, performing the role of devoted wife while documenting the dissolution of my marriage. I cracked eggs for Scott's breakfast, whisking them exactly how he preferred with a splash of cream and white pepper, while my phone recorded from its position against the coffee maker. The video captured his entrance at 7:45, the way he grabbed his coffee without acknowledgement, scrolling through emails on his phone. Big presentation today? I asked, maintaining the conversational rhythm we'd established over 7 years. He responded, not looking up. The cologne hit me then. Something new, expensive, with notes of bergamot and cedar. Tom Ford maybe. Definitely not the Calvin Klein I'd bought him for Christmas. You smell nice. New cologne. His eyes flicked up briefly, a tell I recognized from years of watching him navigate minor deceptions. Harrison recommended it. Said professional image includes all the details. Harrison. Already influencing his grooming choices. I made a mental note while flipping his eggs. The October credit card statement would be interesting. Client dinner tonight, Scott announced, standing to leave. Don't wait up. I checked his synchronized calendar on my phone after he left. The one he'd connected to share our schedules. Tuesday, October 15th showed nothing after 3 p.m. No client names, no restaurant reservations, no conference room bookings. But there was a charge on our joint account from yesterday. Chez Laurent, the French restaurant downtown. Table for two. $180. Business lunch, he'd categorize it later. Except his actual company card statements showed he'd been in back-to-back meetings at the office during lunch. The joint account told other stories too. $5,000 withdrawn last Thursday, labeled Investment Opportunity, Emerging Markets Fund. Except I knew every legitimate fund Scott had ever considered, and none required cash payments to personal accounts. The routing number on the withdrawal matched publicly available information for Blackwood and Associates client trust account. Harrison Blackwood was charging premium rates for dismantling marriages, and Scott was paying him from the account I'd meticulously managed for 7 years. I documented everything in a spreadsheet, color-coded and cross-referenced. The cologne purchases at Nordstrom. The unexplained ATM withdrawals in neighborhoods nowhere near his office. The client entertainment charges at bars when his calendar showed he should have been home. Each entry building a financial narrative of a man preparing his exit while assuming his wife was too simple to notice patterns in numbers. Saturday arrived with our monthly couples dinner, the one social obligation Scott hadn't found an excuse to avoid yet. Marcus and Jennifer Chin hosted this time, their craftsman home warm with cooking smells and the sound of their twin boys arguing about video games upstairs. Marcus worked as a tax attorney, the kind who handled complex corporate structures and actually understood the difference between bookkeeping and financial consulting. Kelly. Jennifer hugged me at the door. Marcus has been raving about that restructuring you did for the Morrison Group. Said it was brilliant. Scott's hand tightened on my lower back, his signal for me to deflect. But I was done deflecting. It was an interesting challenge, I said loud enough for others to hear. $40 million in tax savings through proper structural reorganization. $40 million? David Kim whistled from the living room. That's serious money. Kelly loves her numbers, Scott interjected quickly, steering me inside. Always exaggerating the importance of decimal places. Marcus looked between us, his lawyer instincts clearly activated. Decimal places don't add up to $40 million, Scott. That's strategic financial architecture. The evening progressed with Scott performing damage control, casually mentioning his promotion every 10 minutes while lamenting about carrying the financial burden of our household. When Jennifer asked about vacation plans, he laughed bitterly. Vacation? On one salary? Maybe if I didn't have to cover everything myself. But Kelly's consulting, Marcus started. Her little bookkeeping projects barely cover her car payment, Scott interrupted, taking another sip of wine. His third glass. I'm essentially a single-income household. Marcus's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. He knew exactly what Hamilton Financial Services billed because his firm had referred 2 clients to me last year. But he said nothing, just filed the information away with the precision of someone who understood that sometimes silence gathered more evidence than confrontation. Must be stressful, David offered diplomatically. Financial pressure can strain any marriage. You have no idea, Scott agreed, missing the concerned looks Jennifer and Marcus exchanged. That night, after Scott had fallen asleep, wine always knocked him out by 10 p.m., I sat in our bathroom with my phone and called Sarah in California. My sister answered on the second ring despite the time difference. Kelly? It's nearly midnight there. What's wrong? I need legal advice. Oh honey, what did Scott do? The question made me laugh, bitter and short. It's more about what he's planning to do. And what I've already done. I explained everything. The overheard conversation with Patricia, the lawyer fees, the asset documentation based on false assumptions. Then I told her about Hamilton Financial Services, about the LLC structure, about ownership documents that preceded our marriage by 2 years. Sarah whistled low. You set up asset protection before marriage? That's actually brilliant. I wasn't planning for divorce. I was planning for business liability protection. Doesn't matter why you did it. What matters is legal structure. Is his name on any actual ownership documents? Not authorized user, not signatory, actual ownership. No. I've been careful about that. Then he has no claim. Zero. The apartment, the investments. If they're held by your LLC and that predates marriage, he can document income disparity all he wants. Won't matter. What about the fact that I've let him believe he owns half of everything? You've let him believe a lot of things. That's not illegal. Has he ever asked to see ownership documents? Never. He just assumes his name being on accounts means ownership. Sarah's legal mind was fully engaged now. Kelly, he's building a case on a foundation that doesn't exist. When his lawyer discovers the LLC structure, it's going to be like pulling a bottom card from a house of cards. Should I tell him? Absolutely not. Let him document everything. Let him file papers. Let him present his case about income disparity. The more he commits to this narrative, the more spectacular the collapse when reality hits. After ending the call, I stood in our bedroom doorway watching Scott sleep. He'd kicked off the covers, sprawled across the bed like he owned it. Tomorrow he'd wake up and continue his performance of the successful director with the embarrassing wife. He'd meet with Harrison Blackwood and strategize about asset division. He'd text someone about dinner plans that weren't on his calendar. And I'd continue my own performance. The devoted wife who didn't notice the new cologne, the missing money, the contempt barely concealed behind corporate speak. But underneath that performance I was building something else entirely. A comprehensive audit of our marriage's dissolution, documented with the precision of someone who understood that numbers never lie, even when people do. The irony wasn't lost on me. Scott was so focused on documenting our income disparity that he'd never thought to verify who actually owned the life he was trying to claim. 2 weeks passed in careful orchestration. I maintained every routine while Scott grew increasingly confident in his deception, mistaking my consistency for obliviousness. On Wednesday morning, he approached me with the studied casualness of someone who'd practiced their lines during their commute. Kelly, we should talk about our future trajectory. He stood by the kitchen island, coffee mug in hand, using the same tone he'd used to propose a quarterly business review. I think it would be beneficial to meet with a neutral third party to discuss our growing incompatibility issues. Incompatibility issues. He'd workshopped that phrase, I could tell. Probably ran it by Harrison Blackwood to ensure it sounded objective rather than accusatory. A counselor? I asked, though I knew exactly what kind of third party he meant. More of a mediator. Someone who can help us navigate this transition professionally. He set down his mug with deliberate care. I've taken the liberty of arranging someone for tomorrow afternoon. 2 o'clock, if that works with your schedule. My schedule. As if he'd ever shown interest in my client meetings or consulting deadlines before. Tomorrow's fine. Should I prepare anything? Just come with an open mind about restructuring our arrangement. Restructuring our arrangement. He couldn't even say divorce without wrapping it in corporate terminology, sanitizing the personal until it sounded like a merger dissolution rather than the end of a marriage. The next afternoon arrived, gray and drizzling Seattle weather that seemed choreographed for the occasion. Harrison Blackwood appeared at our door at 1:45 p.m. 15 minutes early, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. His handshake felt like he was handling antique porcelain. Delicate, careful, already treating me as something broken. Mrs. Morrison, he said, though my nameplate by the door clearly read Hamilton. Miss Hamilton, I corrected gently, watching him process this small assertion of identity. Of course. My apologies. His smile was practiced, the kind perfected in mirrors and deployed at mediations. Shall we sit? He moved through our apartment with the confidence of someone who'd already mentally catalogued its value. I noticed him noting the artwork, the furniture, the view from the living room windows, calculating assets while maintaining his sympathetic expression. Scott had arranged our dining room like a conference space, Legal pads positioned at each seat, water glasses filled and positioned with geometric precision. He'd even dimmed the overhead light and turned on the table lamps, creating what he probably thought was a professional atmosphere but actually felt like a funeral home viewing room. "Thank you both for making time for this discussion," Blackwood began, settling into his chair and opening his briefcase with theatrical precision. "As you know, we're here to address the financial realities of your situation." Financial realities. Not emotional realities, not relational realities. They'd already reduced our marriage to a spreadsheet. Scott cleared his throat, pulling out his phone. "I've prepared a presentation to illustrate the core issues." A presentation. He'd made a PowerPoint about our divorce. I watched him connect his phone to the smart TV we'd bought last Christmas. Or rather that I'd bought while he complained about the expense. The first slide appeared, Financial Incompatibility Analysis. Below it, a graph showing 2 lines, his salary trending upward, mine flatlining at what he assumed was $40,000 annually. He'd used our wedding photo as a watermark behind the graph, our smiling faces ghosted behind his fabricated data. "As you can see," Scott began, his presenter voice activated, "the earnings gap has become unsustainable. My career trajectory requires a partner who can contribute equally to our lifestyle objectives." The next slide, Current Asset Allocation Inefficiencies. He'd actually created a pie chart of our supposed contributions, his portion consuming 90% of the circle while mine appeared as a sliver barely visible without squinting. "The disparity creates what economists would call a deadweight loss," he continued, clicking to another slide showing theoretical calculations. "Resources that could be optimized for growth are instead maintaining an inefficient status quo." Deadweight loss. He'd just described our marriage as an economic inefficiency, reduced me to a drain on his theoretical productivity. I took notes on my legal pad, writing deadweight loss in careful letters while Blackwood nodded approvingly at Scott's performance. "The solution is clear." Scott moved to his final slide titled, Proposed Restructuring Terms. "A clean division that acknowledges the primary contributor while ensuring a humane transition for the dependent party." Dependent party. Not wife, not Kelly, not even soon-to-be ex. I'd been abstracted into economic terminology. Blackwood produced a folder from his briefcase, sliding documents across the table with practiced precision. "These papers outline the terms Mr. Morrison has generously proposed. The apartment transfers to him, given his primary financial contribution. The investment portfolio likewise. He's even willing to consider temporary support payments to ease your transition." Support payments. Scott wanted alimony from me, but they'd reframed it as his generosity. I read through each page with the attention I'd give a complex audit, noting every assumption, every miscalculation based on Scott's fictional understanding of our finances. The apartment he claimed owned by Hamilton Financial Services. The investments he demanded managed under my advisory license. Even the car he listed as an asset was leased through my LLC. "This seems comprehensive," I said finally, pulling out my pen. "The Mont Blanc I used for signing consulting contracts worth more than Scott's annual salary." "You're being very understanding," Blackwood observed, his condescension barely concealed. "Many spouses in your position would be emotional." My position. The position of someone about to lose everything, he meant. Except I wasn't in that position at all. I signed each page with deliberate care, the same signature that appeared on restructuring proposals for Fortune 500 companies. Scott watched with barely concealed satisfaction, probably already planning his victory call to Patricia. "I believe that concludes our business," Blackwood announced, gathering the papers with obvious relief. "Mr. Morrison, you should be settled in your new arrangement within 30 days. After they shook hands, a firm, congratulatory grip between conspirators, and Blackwood departed, Scott immediately retreated to the bedroom with his phone. I heard his voice through the door, excited and slightly manic. "Mom, it's done. He signed everything. No resistance at all. Exactly like you predicted, completely passive. We can start planning the renovations next week. Yes, the entire apartment will need updating. Her basic taste is everywhere. The kitchen especially, so dated." Patricia's laughter carried through the door, sharp and delighted. They were already erasing me from the space, planning to paint over my presence like I was an unfortunate color choice. I stood in the hallway listening to them celebrate my supposed defeat, holding the copies Blackwood had left for my records. Predictably passive, they'd said. Basic taste. Dated choices. They were so busy congratulating themselves on their victory that they'd never wondered why someone who managed complex financial restructuring would sign such obviously unfavorable terms without question. Never considered that cooperation might be strategy, not surrender. I filed the papers carefully in my office, placing them next to the LLC documentation, the property trust papers, and 7 years of financial records that told an entirely different story than the PowerPoint presentation still glowing on our television screen. The real presentation would come later, delivered not in slides and charts but in legal reality that would shatter every assumption they'd made. For now, I returned to the kitchen and began preparing dinner, maintaining the routine of a defeated wife while Scott and Patricia planned renovations for an apartment that had never belonged to him. The salmon I'd prepared sat untouched on Scott's plate as he scrolled through his phone, occasionally grunting responses to my attempts at conversation. I cleared the dishes quietly, maintaining the routine of a defeated wife, while mentally preparing for coffee with Marcus Chin the next morning. Marcus had texted me privately after the dinner party, suggesting we meet to discuss tax implications of major life changes. We both knew he meant more than taxes. I arrived at the coffee shop on Pine Street 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table away from the morning rush. Marcus walked in precisely at 9, his expression shifting from professional sympathy to curiosity when he saw I wasn't crying or visibly distressed. "Kelly, I'm sorry about what's happening with Scott," he began, settling into his chair with a large Americano. "That dinner last week was uncomfortable to witness. Actually, Marcus, I need professional advice more than sympathy." I pulled out a folder from my bag, the one containing Hamilton Financial Services documentation. "Before I show you this, I need to know our conversation is protected by attorney-client privilege." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You're hiring me?" I slid a check across the table. $1 retainer. "Now we're official." Marcus accepted the check with a growing smile, then opened the folder. I watched his expression transform as he read through the LLC formation documents, the property trust papers, the investment management structures. His coffee sat forgotten as he flipped through 7 years of meticulous documentation. "Kelly, this is..." He paused, reviewing the apartment ownership papers again. "Hamilton Financial Services owns everything. The apartment, the investment portfolio, even the car lease runs through your company. Established 2 years before I married Scott," I confirmed. "Every major asset is protected under the LLC structure." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a low whistle escaping his lips. "And Scott doesn't know?" "He's never asked. Just assumed that having his name on bank accounts meant ownership. He signs whatever I put in front of him without reading." "This is a golden parachute," Marcus said, still studying the documents. "No, it's better than that. This is a fortress disguised as a starter home. When Blackwood discovers this structure, he's going to have a meltdown. Does Scott really think he owns the apartment? He's already planning renovations with his mother." Marcus actually laughed, then caught himself. "Sorry, that's not professional. But Kelly, you realize he has absolutely no claim to any of this? The divorce papers he had you sign are essentially fantasy documents based on assets that don't exist in the legal structure he assumes." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Boarding now. See you tonight. Brought my war paint." My sister's way of saying she'd packed her legal files and was ready for battle. I showed Marcus the text. "Sarah's flying in from California. She's a contract lawyer, wants to help me organize everything." "Good. You'll need documentation for when this implodes." Marcus handed back the folder. "Can I give you some unofficial advice? Let Scott keep digging this hole. The deeper he goes with his assumptions, the more spectacular the revelation will be." That evening, Sarah arrived looking every inch the California lawyer in her designer suit and perfect makeup, though her eyes showed the concern of a younger sister. She hugged me fiercely at the airport, whispering, "We're going to destroy him," into my ear before pulling back with a professional smile. Back at the apartment, while Scott attended another mysterious client dinner, Sarah and I spread 7 years of financial records across the dining table where Blackwood had presented his fantasy division of assets just yesterday. Sarah had brought her laptop and a portable scanner, determined to digitize everything. "Start from the beginning," she instructed, pulling up a spreadsheet. "Every deposit, Every client payment, everything. We worked through the night, fueled by coffee and righteous anger. The numbers told a story Scott had never bothered to read. My consulting income from last year alone totaled $347,000. Scott's W-2 showed $98,000, not the $120 he claimed. The bonuses he bragged about were fiction. Wait, Sarah paused at her laptop screen around 2 a.m. I'm looking at Scott's LinkedIn profile. It says he's Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives. I laughed, exhausted and bitter. He's a mid-level analyst. I have his actual W-2s right here. Sarah turned her laptop toward me. Scott's profile showed a carefully curated fiction of professional success. Senior Director since 2019. Team of 12 direct reports. Key player in multimillion-dollar acquisitions. Even his education was inflated, listing executive programs he'd attended as degrees he'd earned. This is fraud, Sarah said flatly. If his company knew he was misrepresenting his position publicly, he'd be terminated immediately. He believes it, I said, studying his profile photo, that confident smile aimed at a future that didn't exist. He's told the lie so often it's become his truth. Sarah made notes in her legal pad. This explains his desperation to leave you. You're the only witness to his actual reality. Without you, he can fully inhabit this fictional success story. The next morning, while Scott showered, I met with Thomas Brennan, a private investigator Marcus had recommended. Thomas was unremarkable in every way, which he explained was his greatest asset. We met at a diner near the waterfront, away from anywhere Scott might appear. I don't need surveillance, I explained. Just employment verification. Basic background check on his actual position and standing at his company. Thomas nodded, sliding a contract across the table. Standard employment verification runs about 3 days. I'll need his full name, social security number, and employer information. I provided everything, including Scott's inflated LinkedIn profile for comparison. Thomas glanced at it and smirked. Senior Director? At his age. That's ambitious. 3 days later, Thomas called with results that exceeded my worst assumptions. Your husband is on a performance improvement plan, he said without preamble. Has been for 6 months. He's one missed deadline away from termination. His manager described him as struggling to meet basic analyst responsibilities in the documentation I accessed. He told his mother he was being groomed for partner, I said, feeling a strange mix of vindication and pity. He's being groomed for unemployment. My sources indicate they're already interviewing for his replacement. They're just waiting for end of quarter to avoid severance complications. I sat in my home office, staring at Thomas's report. Scott wasn't just lying about our financial dynamic. He was constructing an entirely fictional existence, one where he was successful, prominent, and held back only by his underachieving wife. The reality was he was a failing analyst with an inflated ego, about to lose his job while planning to take assets he didn't understand weren't his. Sarah reviewed the investigator's report that evening, her legal mind already strategizing. When this comes out in court, if it gets that far, his credibility will be completely destroyed. A man who lies about his job title won't be believed about asset ownership. I maintained the performance for exactly 48 hours after signing those papers, each minute calculated and deliberate. Tuesday morning, I woke at my usual time and started Scott's coffee with the same precision I'd applied for 7 years. Medium roast, 1 sugar, splash of oat milk. I ironed his blue shirt, the one he thought made him look executive level, pressing crisp lines into sleeves that would soon have nowhere important to go. When he grabbed his travel mug without acknowledgement, rushing out to his supposedly critical morning meeting, I simply smiled and reminded him about the dry cleaning. Wednesday followed the same pattern. I prepared his breakfast, asked about his projects, listened to him inflate minor tasks into major accomplishments. He talked about strategic initiatives while I nodded, knowing from Thomas's report that his actual assignment involved updating spreadsheets and sitting in meetings where no one asked his opinion. I played the devoted wife so perfectly that Scott grew careless, leaving his laptop open, his phone unlocked, treating me like furniture that happened to cook and clean. Sarah had returned to California but remained on standby, texting me updates as she researched precedents for asset protection in divorce cases. Marcus checked in daily, Each message a reminder that I had allies who understood the magnitude of what was coming. The 48 hours weren't just routine. They were a countdown Harrison Blackwood needed to discover what his client had signed away. Thursday morning arrived crisp and bright. I woke at 5:30, started the coffee and began preparing breakfast. Scott's shower started at exactly 7:45, his routine as predictable as a train schedule. I cracked eggs into the pan, watching them sizzle while his phone sat charging on the counter, screen dark and silent. At 7:52 it rang. Harrison Blackwood's name appeared on the screen. I continued cooking, adding white pepper to the eggs exactly how Scott preferred. The phone stopped, then immediately started again. Same name, presumably same panic. By the third call at 7:54, I could imagine Blackwood pacing his office, his assistant watching nervously as the composed lawyer came undone. The fourth call came at 7:56. This time I heard Scott's muffled voice from the bathroom, annoyed at the interruption. The water was still running, but he must have reached for his waterproof phone holder, the one I'd bought him last Christmas so he could take calls during his important morning routine. Even through the closed door and running water, I heard the exact moment Blackwood's words registered. The water shut off abruptly. Scott's voice, which had started with irritated confidence, climbed in pitch. "What do you mean, Hamilton Financial Services?" I added salt to the eggs, stirring them gently to achieve the creamy consistency Scott demanded. Through the door, Blackwood's voice carried with unexpected clarity, his professional composure cracking like ice under pressure. "The apartment isn't in your name, Scott. It's owned by an LLC. Hamilton Financial Services. Established in 2017, 2 years before your marriage. Your wife is the sole member. You're not on any ownership documents." "That's impossible." Scott's voice had gone thin, strained. "My name is on everything. I've seen it on the statements. You're listed as an authorized user on accounts, not an owner. There's a massive difference legally. The investment portfolio, same situation. The car lease runs through the LLC. Scott, you don't own any of the assets you listed." "Nothing." I plated the eggs alongside wheat toast, cut diagonally the way Scott preferred. The coffee was ready, steaming in his favorite mug. Not the world's best husband, one that sat prominently in the dishwasher, visible from every angle of the kitchen. "She tricked me." Scott's voice cracked like an adolescent's. "She knew this whole time?" The documentation was publicly available. Filed with the state, recorded with the county. Any basic asset search would have revealed it. "We should have verified ownership before proceeding. This is catastrophic for your position." The bathroom door burst open with enough force to bounce off the wall. Scott stood there dripping, a towel hastily wrapped around his waist, his phone clutched in one hand. Water pooled around his feet on the hardwood floors. I'd had refinished with my year-end bonus from the Morrison Group. His face had gone pale except for 2 spots of red high on his cheeks, like a fever patient or a caught child. I turned from the stove, holding his breakfast plate in one hand and his coffee in the other. My expression remained pleasantly neutral, the same face I'd worn every morning for 7 years. "Breakfast is ready," I said, setting both on the counter. "Your eggs might get cold if you don't eat soon." He stared at me, mouth opening and closing without sound. Behind him, Blackwood's voice continued from the phone, talking about legal ramifications and documentation failures, but Scott wasn't listening anymore. His eyes moved from my face to the world's best husband mug in the dishwasher, to the breakfast I'd prepared with the same care as every other morning, and I watched the exact moment he understood. "You knew," he whispered. Not a question. A revelation. I picked up my own coffee, the mug from the financial consulting conference where I'd been a keynote speaker, and took a measured sip. "Your phone was ringing quite insistently. Harrison seems upset about something. You should probably call him back." Water dripped from his hair onto his shoulders, each drop marking time like a metronome. He looked smaller somehow standing there in our kitchen. My kitchen, like he'd shrunk in the shower. The confident director who delivered PowerPoint presentations about dead weight loss had been replaced by a confused man in a towel, trying to process how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. "The LLC," he started, then stopped, struggling to form the accusation. "Hamilton Financial Services," I confirmed. "Established 2017. All properly documented and filed. You signed acknowledgments every year when I did our taxes." Page 37 of the return, Schedule E, where it lists LLC income. You've signed it 7 times. His phone buzzed. Blackwood calling back. Scott didn't answer, couldn't seem to move, caught between the bathroom he'd exited and the kitchen where his assumptions were dying. Your breakfast is getting cold, I observed, returning to the stove to clean the pan. And you have that 9 o'clock meeting about strategic initiatives. The one where you update spreadsheets while pretending to be a director. Wouldn't want to be late for that. The casual cruelty of accuracy made him flinch. He grabbed his phone, stumbling backward toward the bedroom, leaving wet footprints on floors he'd never owned. I heard him trying to call Blackwood back, his voice high and desperate, asking about options and strategies and ways to fight this. But there was nothing to fight. Just numbers on documents, properly filed and legally binding, telling a story he'd never bothered to read. I cleaned the breakfast dishes methodically while Scott dressed in the bedroom, his movements erratic and panicked based on the thuds and drawer slams echoing through the apartment. When he finally emerged, his shirt was buttoned incorrectly and his hair still damp from the shower that had changed everything. He stood in the doorway of my home office, watching me open my laptop with the desperate attention of someone hoping for a different reality. We need to talk about this, he said, his director voice attempting to reassert itself despite the visible tremor in his hands. Certainly. I pulled up the financial spreadsheet I had been maintaining for 7 years, the one with color-coded categories and subcategories that told the actual story of our marriage. Which part would you like to discuss first? The income analysis? The expense allocation? The asset ownership documentation? The screen filled with rows of data, each cell precisely formatted and formula-linked. Green highlighted my consulting deposits. Blue marked Scott's salary. Red indicated household expenses. The pattern was immediately visible. A sea of green funding nearly everything with small islands of blue barely covering his personal expenses. Let's start with January of last year, I said, scrolling to the appropriate section. Your take-home after taxes was $5,847. Your car payment was $890. Gym membership $175. Credit card minimum payments for your personal cards, $1,200. That business dinner series you insisted was networking? $2,400 that month alone. You actually ran a deficit of $347, which I covered from the Hamilton Financial Services operations account. Scott's face flushed as he watched the numbers scroll by. That's not. My salary is higher than that. Your gross salary, yes. But we're looking at actual take-home versus actual expenses. Should I pull up February? March. The pattern remains consistent. Your income covers approximately 18% of our total household expenses. My consulting fees handle the remaining 82%. He grabbed the doorframe, his knuckles white against the wood. You never told me you made that much. You never asked. You assumed. Every year during tax preparation these numbers were in front of you. Schedule C for Hamilton Financial Services. Schedule E for the rental income from the investment property. Form 8829 for the business use of home. You signed them without reading them. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened LinkedIn in a new tab. His profile appeared, that confident headshot next to his fictional title. Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives. I opened another tab showing the W-2 retrieval from our tax software. This is interesting, I said, placing the windows side by side. Your LinkedIn says Senior Director since 2019. Your W-2 says Analyst 2. Same position code for 4 consecutive years. No promotion, no title change, just cost of living adjustments that barely kept pace with inflation. Everyone enhances their profile, Scott stammered. It's marketing. It's fraud when you use it to obtain credit or misrepresent yourself in legal documents. You submitted this profile to Blackwood as evidence of your earning potential. You signed divorce papers claiming to be the primary breadwinner based on this fiction. My phone rang. Patricia's name appeared on the screen, her contact photo from last Christmas when she'd worn her pearls and practiced her superior expression. I answered and immediately put her on speaker. You conniving little witch. Patricia's voice filled the office, shrill and desperate. You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Hiding money, manipulating my son. Good morning, Patricia, I interrupted calmly. I haven't hidden anything. Every document was filed with the state, recorded with the county, and disclosed in annual tax returns that Scott signed. The fact that neither of you bothered to understand what you were signing doesn't constitute manipulation on my part. This is fraud. We'll sue you for fraud. On what grounds? That I maintain proper business records? That I established an LLC before marriage, which is actually recommended by financial advisors. That Scott signed documents without reading them? Please, Patricia, consult any attorney. They'll tell you the same thing Blackwood already has. Everything was legal and properly documented. Scott reached for my phone, but I pulled it away, maintaining eye contact with him while his mother continued her tirade. He's moving home, isn't he? I asked Patricia directly. You should probably prepare his room. The one with the soccer trophies and participation awards. He'll need somewhere to live in 30 days. 30 days. Scott's voice cracked. What do you mean 30 days? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the formal eviction notice I'd had Marcus prepare, properly formatted on Hamilton Financial Services letterhead. As the property owner, I'm terminating your month-to-month tenancy. 30 days notice as required by state law. You'll need to vacate by November 15th. He took the paper with shaking hands, reading it twice as if the words might change. You can't evict me. We're married. We're divorced, remember? You filed the papers. Blackwood processed them. The marriage is dissolved, which makes you a tenant in a property owned by my LLC. A tenant without a lease, without any claim to ownership, and now without permission to remain. Patricia's voice had gone quiet on the speaker, reduced to angry breathing and muffled sobs. The woman who had called me dead weight was processing the reality that her successful son was about to become her unemployed roommate. How will I explain this? Scott asked, the question directed at neither of us and both of us simultaneously. Everyone thinks I won the divorce. That I got everything. That's a branding problem, I suggested. Maybe update your LinkedIn profile? Though I'd recommend being more accurate this time. Unemployed analyst seeking housing has a certain honest ring to it. You're enjoying this, he accused, his voice bitter and small. I considered that for a moment, looking at the man who had called me pathetic, who had plotted my disposal with his mother over wine, who had presented PowerPoint slides about my inadequacy. I'm not enjoying it, I said truthfully. I'm simply concluding it. You wanted a divorce based on financial incompatibility. You got one. The incompatibility just wasn't in the direction you assumed. Patricia had found her voice again. We'll fight this. We'll find a way. Patricia, I interrupted, my tone professional and final. Scott has two priorities right now. First, finding a new place to live before his eviction takes effect. Second, updating his resume with accurate information before his termination becomes final. Oh, didn't he mention that? He's been on performance improvement for 6 months. His company is already interviewing replacements. The silence that followed was complete. Patricia's breathing stopped. Scott's hand holding the eviction notice went still. For a moment, the only sound was the morning traffic outside my window and the quiet hum of my laptop displaying 7 years of meticulous documentation. The beautiful thing about numbers, I said, closing my laptop with deliberate finality, is that they never lie. People lie. Profiles lie. Presentations lie. But numbers? Numbers tell the truth if you bother to read them. Scott left my office clutching the eviction notice, Patricia still breathing heavily through the phone speaker before I finally disconnected the call. Within 4 hours he had contacted the first of what would become 3 different law firms, each consultation more desperate than the last. I learned about his legal tour through Marcus, who encountered him at a professional networking event 2 weeks later, where Scott cornered him near the appetizer table. He actually grabbed my arm, Marcus told me over lunch the following day, shaking his head with professional embarrassment. Started demanding I explain how his wife could own property without him knowing. I had to remind him you weren't his wife anymore, per his own filing. Then I told him what every other attorney already had, that signatures on documents constitute legal acknowledgement, whether you read them or not. The second attorney Scott consulted was Amanda Crawford from Crawford and Associates, the same firm where Harrison's wife had just made partner. Amanda later mentioned to me at a financial conference that Scott had arrived with a binder of printed emails and text messages, trying to prove I had deceived him through malicious competence, which she said wasn't actually a legal concept. The third attorney, someone Patricia found through her country club connections, simply refused to take the case after reviewing the documentation. Meanwhile, I began the process of reclaiming my space. The morning after Scott moved his clothes to Patricia's house, a process that involved him making 7 trips with garbage bags while neighbors watched from their windows, I stood in the center of my apartment with paint samples. The walls he had insisted remain professional gray would become warm terracotta in the living room, soft sage in the bedroom, and buttery cream in the kitchen. I hired painters who completed the transformation in 3 days, during which I worked from a coffee shop and felt my shoulders gradually drop from their permanent position near my ears. Scott's former office, where he had conducted his video calls with Patricia and plotted my financial disposal, became a yoga studio. I removed his massive desk, the filing cabinets full of fictional achievements, and the vision board where he had pinned pictures of cars he couldn't afford and houses he would never own. In their place, I installed bamboo flooring, a wall of mirrors, and a sound system for guided meditations. The first time I did morning yoga in that space, sunlight streaming through windows he had kept covered with heavy blinds, I actually laughed out loud at the transformation. Jennifer Chin called the following week, inviting me to a dinner party. "Just the real friends," she said pointedly. "The ones who knew your value before all this drama surfaced." That Saturday, I arrived at her house with a case of wine I discovered in our storage unit. Bottles Scott had been saving for what he called his freedom celebration, expensive vintages he had researched extensively and purchased with my consulting bonuses. We opened a 2015 Bordeaux that evening, toasting with crystal glasses to accurate documentation, while Marcus regaled the group with legally appropriate details about Scott's attempts to find representation. "The best part," Marcus said, swirling his wine, "is that Patricia has been telling everyone at her bridge club that Scott is staying with her temporarily while his new executive apartment is being renovated. Except Linda Patterson's daughter works in HR at Scott's former company. Former because they finally terminated him last Tuesday." Patricia nearly fainted when Linda asked her how the job search was going. I had established my new morning routine by then. Each day at 5:30 a.m., I sat at my kitchen island with coffee in a new mug Jennifer had given me as a divorce gift, white ceramic with "World's Best Accountant" in gold letters. I would review contracts and proposals while watching the sunrise paint the Seattle skyline in shades of pink and gold, colors that seemed brighter now that no one was there to complain about the early morning light disturbing their sleep. My phone rang during one of these morning sessions. Margaret Chin, the CFO's wife I had met at Scott's last corporate dinner, wanted to discuss her daughter's startup. Word had spread through the executive wives network about what had really happened in my divorce, and suddenly everyone wanted the financial consultant who had been hiding in plain sight at their dinner parties. Within a month, I had signed 3 new Fortune 500 clients, each referred by someone who had previously dismissed me as Scott's bookkeeper wife. The expansion happened naturally. I hired an assistant, Melody, a recent graduate with the kind of hungry intelligence that reminded me of myself 7 years ago. Then came David, a junior consultant who specialized in international tax structures. By month 4, I needed a third employee just to manage scheduling and client communications. Hamilton Financial Services moved from my home office to a suite on the 40th floor of the Rainier Tower, with views of the Sound and Mount Rainier on clear days. 6 months after that morning when Blackwood's panicked call had shattered Scott's shower, Marcus mentioned casually that he had run into Scott at a Starbucks near Patricia's neighborhood. Scott was wearing a polo shirt with a corporate logo, the uniform of his new job at a car rental company where he worked as an assistant manager. He had tried to inflate it, naturally, telling Marcus he was exploring opportunities in the transportation sector, but the name tag reading "Scott here to serve you" had undermined his spin. He actually said the divorce was due to financial incompatibility, Marcus reported, barely containing his amusement. Which is technically accurate, just not in the direction he implies. He also mentioned that living with his mother was temporary while he restructured his portfolio, though I'm not sure what portfolio he could be referring to at this point. I smiled at that, sitting in my new office where afternoon light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The truth was, Scott had been right about one thing. We were financially incompatible. He had believed that earnings determined worth, that visible success mattered more than actual achievement, that a person's value could be measured in titles and salaries. I had believed in documentation, legal structures, and the quiet accumulation of real assets while he accumulated fictional accomplishments. The silence I had maintained throughout our marriage had indeed been strategy, but not the kind Scott had imagined. It wasn't submission or ignorance or inability. It was the patience of someone who knew that truth, properly documented, would eventually speak louder than any performance, any presentation, any carefully crafted narrative built on assumptions and ego. My financial statements now showed what they had always shown, just no longer hidden behind someone else's need to feel superior. Hamilton Financial Services was thriving, my success no longer minimized or dismissed. Every morning I drank coffee from my world's best accountant mug and thought about how Scott had wanted to leave me because I earned less than him. The beautiful irony was that he had never actually been married to someone who earned less than him. He had just been married to someone who understood that the best power is the kind that doesn't need to announce itself until the moment it matters most. If this story of calculated revenge had you gripping your screen, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Kelly handed Scott coffee while Blackwood panicked on the phone, knowing her LC owned everything. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more jaw-dropping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. At the promotion meeting I smiled and said, "I can't wait for my raise." My husband, the boss, laughed. "Raise? Oh no, I gave it to Hazel." HR confirmed I wasn't even considered. Hazel grinned, "Forgot to mention it." That afternoon I cleared my desk. But what I did afterward, nobody saw it coming. "I can't wait for my raise," I announced to the conference room, my portfolio of achievements heavy in my hands. Jasper looked up from his phone for the first time since I'd walked in, and the expression on his face made my chest tighten. Not pride. Not approval. Amusement. Pure, undisguised amusement at my expense. Raise. He set down his phone with deliberate slowness. "Oh no, Aurora. I gave it to Hazel." The conference room's fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, too harsh, illuminating every face turned toward me with varying degrees of discomfort and pity. Bethany from HR cleared her throat and slid a folder across the mahogany table. Her manicured nails tapped against the cover twice before withdrawing. "You weren't even considered for the position, Aurora. The decision was made last week." I stood there, portfolio still clutched against my chest, watching Hazel Morrison walk through the glass doors in her new red heels. The same heels she'd shown me last month, asking if they were too much for the office. I told her they were perfect for making an impression. She caught my eye and offered the slightest shrug. "Forgot to mention it," she said, settling into the leather chair directly across from where I stood. "Before we continue, if you've ever been overlooked for a promotion you deserved, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us share stories of women who refuse to accept less than their worth." The portfolio in my hands contained 8 months of evidence that I'd single-handedly saved this company from hemorrhaging clients. The Campbell Industries campaign alone, which I'd worked on until 3 in the morning for 2 straight weeks, had retained a contract worth $2 million this quarter. The Morrison Hotels crisis that I'd resolved before it hit the media. The complete overhaul of our digital marketing strategy that increased engagement by 340%. But none of that mattered now. I set the portfolio on the table without opening it. "I see. Well then, I'll need the afternoon to transition my current projects." "That won't be necessary," Hazel interjected, her voice carrying a confidence I'd never heard before. "I've already been briefed on everything. Jasper's been bringing me up to speed for the past month." The past month. While I'd been preparing my promotion presentation, practicing my pitch in the shower, calculating how the raise would finally allow us to renovate the kitchen, my husband had been secretly training my replacement. The same husband who'd listened to me rehearse my talking points over dinner. Who'd nodded encouragingly when I'd shown him my portfolio layout. Who'd made love to me last night without once mentioning that this meeting would be my professional execution. I managed to walk out of that conference room without saying another word. My desk sat in the corner of the marketing department, a cubicle barely large enough for my chair and filing cabinet despite my unofficial role as the person who actually ran things. Through Hazel's office window, the actual marketing director's office that had sat mostly empty for 2 years, I could see shopping bags from her lunch hour sprees still piled on her credenza. Timothy was waiting by my desk holding his tablet with that familiar look of controlled panic. Aurora, the Campbell Industries presentation needs final approval before. Give it to Hazel, I said, pulling my personal items from the drawers. The orchid I'd nursed through 2 winters. The coffee mug Emma had given me that read, "World's Best Multitasker." The framed photo from our company retreat where I'd been named Employee of the Quarter for the 3rd consecutive time. But Hazel doesn't know the Campbell account. She's never even met their team. I paused, looking at Timothy's earnest face. He was 24, fresh from graduate school, brilliant but still naive enough to believe hard work guaranteed recognition. Then I guess she'd better learn quickly. The drive home took 17 minutes. I counted every red light, every turn signal, every mile that put distance between me and that building where I'd given everything and received nothing in return. Our house sat on a tree-lined street in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood, the kind of place successful couples bought when they were building their futures together. The kitchen still needed renovating. Now it would stay exactly as it was. I set the box of my belongings on the dining table and noticed the Campbell Industries contract sitting on Jasper's home office desk. The margins were filled with handwritten notes. Not Jasper's angular scrawl that I knew from 12 years of marriage. These loops and curves belonged to Hazel. Dates going back 6 weeks. Strategy notes about approaches I'd developed. Client relationship details I'd painstakingly built. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma at college. "How did the big meeting go, Mom? Did you get it?" I stared at those words, thinking about the tuition bills, the student loans we'd co-signed, the promises we'd made about supporting her dreams while I'd apparently been too blind to see my own being methodically dismantled. The house felt different already. Not like a home where 2 successful people built their life together, but like a stage where I'd been performing the role of supportive wife while missing all the signs that the show was ending. The Campbell Industries presentation I'd perfected at 5:30 that morning still sat in my laptop, ready for a meeting that would never happen. The coffee maker still held the remnants of Jasper's perfect 2 sugars no cream brew that I'd made while believing we were partners. 3 months I'd had that Thursday afternoon circled and red on my calendar. 3 months of believing that excellence would be rewarded, that dedication meant something, that the person sleeping beside me every night actually saw my value beyond my ability to fix problems and save accounts while someone else got the credit. I opened my laptop and began making a list. Not of achievements or presentations or campaigns that had saved the company millions. This list was different. This one started with every password, every client contact, every system I'd built that they didn't even know existed. Because while Jasper thought he'd simply denied me a raise, what he'd actually done was light a fuse. They just didn't know it was burning yet. The list sat on my laptop screen, cursor blinking at the end of the last password I'd documented. My hands moved to close the computer, but something made me pause. The house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you hear your own heartbeat. Jasper would be home in 2 hours, and I needed to decide what kind of evening this would be. The dutiful wife preparing dinner, or the woman who just had her career detonated by the person who was supposed to have her back. My phone vibrated against the dining table. Timothy again. Morrison Hotels is in full panic mode. Hazel told them you quit without notice. They're threatening to pull the contract. I stared at the message, feeling something shift in my chest. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity that made everything sharper. Hazel had already started her narrative. Aurora the deserter. Aurora the unprofessional. Aurora who couldn't handle not getting her way. I typed back, "Not my problem anymore," but deleted it without sending. Timothy didn't deserve coldness meant for others. The front door opened at 6:47, Jasper's usual time when he wasn't working late with associates or in meetings I now wondered about. His keys hit the bowl by the entrance with their familiar clink. His footsteps moved through the foyer, paused at the dining room where my box of office belongings still sat, then continued to the kitchen where I stood chopping vegetables for a salad neither of us would eat. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie. "What's for dinner?" The casual normalcy of it made my hand tighten on the knife. He moved behind me to get a beer from the refrigerator, his cologne filling the space between us. The same cologne I'd bought him for Christmas, selected because it reminded me of confidence and success. Now it smelled like betrayal, pretending everything was fine. "Jasper." I set the knife down carefully, turning to face him. "We need to talk about today." He popped the beer cap against the counter edge, a habit I'd asked him to stop because it left marks on the granite. "What about today?" "The promotion meeting." Hazel. The fact that you've been training her for my job for a month while I prepared a presentation you knew was pointless. He sighed, the kind of exhale that suggested I was being dramatic. Aurora, we discussed this possibility. The board has concerns about appearances. A husband promoting his wife doesn't look good, especially with the Fletcher acquisition coming up. The Fletcher acquisition I structured. The one where I spent 3 weeks courting their CMO to make sure the transition would be smooth. Which is exactly why we need someone like Hazel in that role. Someone without personal connections that could be seen as conflicts of interest. He took a long drink of his beer, avoiding my eyes. This is what's best for the company. Someone like Hazel who asked me last week what ROI stands for? His jaw tightened. She's learning. On my frameworks. Using my client relationships. Taking credit for campaigns I built at 3 a.m. while you slept beside me. That's how business works, Aurora. You knew that when we got married. You knew there would be complicated situations. I laughed, surprising both of us. Not a bitter laugh or a sad one, but genuine amusement at the mental gymnastics required to make this my fault. Complicated situations. That's what we're calling it when you systematically hand over my work to someone else while lying to my face about it. I never lied. Every morning for the past month, you watched me prepare for that meeting. You listened to me practice my presentation over dinner. You made love to me last night knowing that today you would humiliate me in front of the entire leadership team. What would you call that? He set his beer on the counter, the condensation already forming a ring on the granite. I'd call it protecting you. Do you know what people say about us? About how you only have your position because of me. This way, when you succeed, it's on your own merit. When I succeed, I've already succeeded. Every campaign that's kept us profitable this quarter has my fingerprints all over it. The only thing you've protected me from is getting credit for my own work. The doorbell rang, sharp and intrusive. We stood frozen, neither moving to answer it. It rang again, followed by knocking. That's probably Margaret, I said, remembering my sister's text about dropping by with some books she'd borrowed. I'll get it. But when I opened the door, Hazel Morrison stood on my porch. She'd changed from the red heels into designer sneakers, traded her power suit for yoga clothes that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her smile was different now, more genuine, like we were girlfriends about to grab coffee. Hi, Aurora. I hope I'm not interrupting dinner. Behind me, I heard Jasper's footsteps approaching. Hazel, what are you doing here? You left your laptop at the office, she said to him, not me, producing his MacBook from her oversized purse. You said you needed it for the Fletcher presentation tomorrow. I thought I'd drop it by on my way to Pilates. On her way to Pilates. Our house was 15 minutes out of the way from the office to any Pilates studio in Portland. I watched Jasper take the laptop, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. The gesture was small, practiced, familiar. Thanks, he said. I completely forgot. No problem. Hazel's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. About tomorrow's presentation, should I use Aurora's deck or create something fresh? Create something fresh, he said without hesitation. We need a new perspective. She nodded, satisfied. Great. I'll see you at 7 for our breakfast meeting. Her attention shifted to me fully for the first time. Aurora, I'm sorry about today. I know it must have been unexpected. But I'm sure you understand it's what's best for everyone. The words were perfectly chosen. Not an admission of wrongdoing, not an acknowledgement of what she'd taken, just the kind of corporate sympathy that meant nothing and cost less. I could have responded with anger, with accusations, with the dozen questions burning in my throat about how long she'd been planning this, how many of my ideas she'd already claimed, how it felt to steal someone else's life's work. That I smiled. The same smile I'd perfected in conference rooms and client dinners, the one that gave away nothing while suggesting everything was under control. Of course, Hazel. I understand perfectly. She blinked, perhaps expecting tears or shouting or some other display of emotion she could report back to the office tomorrow. When none came, she shifted uncomfortably. Well, I should get to class. After she left, Jasper closed the door and turned to me. See? She's trying to be professional about this. Professional, I repeated. Is that what we're calling showing up at your employee's house in workout clothes to deliver a laptop you could have survived without until tomorrow? Don't make this something it's not. But I was already walking away, heading upstairs to our bedroom. In the closet, I pulled out my suitcase, the one we'd bought for our honeymoon 12 years ago. It still had the luggage tag from Maui, faded but readable. Paradise found, it said. I almost laughed at the irony. What are you doing? Jasper stood in the doorway, his beer forgotten downstairs. Getting some space to think. Aurora, don't be dramatic. It's just a job. I paused, holding the sweater Emma had given me last Christmas. You're right. It's just a job. And this is just a marriage where my husband orchestrates my professional humiliation while his new protege drops by our house in yoga pants. Nothing dramatic about that at all. The suitcase sat half-packed on our bed, Jasper watching from the doorway as I folded another blouse. Neither of us had slept. He'd stayed downstairs most of the night while I lay awake calculating 12 years of marriage against 8 months of lies. By Friday morning, the arithmetic still didn't balance. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. with an automated message from IT. Your remote access has been terminated. Please contact your administrator for questions. I grabbed my company laptop from the nightstand, fingers flying across the keyboard before they could lock me out completely. The download bar crept across the screen. 8 months of emails, project files, client correspondence. Everything that proved what I'd built and what had been stolen. An email from 3 months ago stopped me cold. Jasper to Hazel, marked confidential. Aurora is too emotionally invested in her campaigns to see the bigger picture. We need someone who can separate feelings from strategy. Let's discuss your transition timeline over dinner Thursday. Thursday. I remembered that Thursday. I'd been visiting my mother in Seattle, helping her recover from hip surgery. Jasper had said he was too busy with quarterly reports to come with me. The download finished just as the laptop screen went black, access revoked. But I had what I needed. I took screenshots with my phone while scrambling eggs Jasper wouldn't eat, maintaining the bizarre normalcy of a morning routine while our marriage dissolved in real time. He sat at the kitchen island pretending to read news on his tablet, both of us playing roles in a show that had already closed. I'll stay at Margaret's for a few days, I said, sliding eggs onto a plate I knew would go untouched. This is ridiculous, Aurora. You're overreacting to a professional decision. My phone rang before I could respond. Margaret's name flashed on the screen and I almost laughed at the timing. Hey Max. Don't you hey Max me. I just saw your LinkedIn post about exploring new opportunities. What happened? And don't give me corporate speak. I'm your sister. I glanced at Jasper, who'd gone rigid at his tablet. It's complicated. Can I call you back? Or wait. Before you hang up, I need to tell you something. Remember 6 weeks ago when I was downtown for that conference? I saw Jasper at Romano's with that woman from his office, the one with the red hair. Hazel. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Romano's. They were at the back corner table, the one you always say is too romantic for business dinners. She was laughing at something he said, touching his hand. I figured you knew about the meeting, but something felt off about it. 6 weeks ago. I'd been working late on the Morrison Hotel's crisis, eating takeout at my desk while Jasper was supposedly at a board dinner. Thanks for telling me, Margaret. I'll call you later. After I hung up, Jasper's tablet lay flat on the counter, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. It wasn't what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything. I'm just connecting dots that should have been obvious months ago. I spent the rest of Friday turning our dining room into an investigation center. The table I'd bought for hosting dinner parties became a landscape of evidence. 3 distinct piles emerged as the sun set over Portland, each more damning than the last. The first pile contained Hazel's expense reports for the past 6 months. Client dinners at restaurants our clients never visited. Conference registrations for events she never attended. Travel receipts that didn't match any scheduled meetings. Nearly $40,000 in questionable expenses, all approved by Jasper without question. The second pile was my proof of ownership. Every Campbell Industries document with my metadata embedded showing creation dates, revision histories, my digital signature on every strategic decision. The presentation Hazel claimed to have developed last month? I'd created the template in January, refined it through 17 versions, each one time-stamped and tracked. But the third pile made my hands shake. Security badge records I'd saved months ago for an efficiency audit, never submitted because I'd found something else entirely. Jasper and Hazel's badges swiping into the executive floor at 11 p.m. on 7 different Saturdays. Always when I was in Seattle with my mother. always leaving within minutes of each other around 2 a.m. By midnight, the evidence covered every inch of the table. My phone had been silent except for work contacts asking why I'd disappeared and Emma texting about her classes, unaware her parents' marriage was unraveling thread by thread. I couldn't tell her yet. Not until I understood the full scope of what I was looking at. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, Portland's signature weather matching my mood. I was deep in spreadsheets when my phone rang with a number I recognized but rarely saw. Dennis Palmer, the longest-serving board member and one of the few people who'd known me before I became Jasper's wife. Aurora. His voice was careful, measured. I heard about Thursday's meeting. News travels fast. Indeed it does. Listen, I'm calling from my personal phone for a reason. There are changes coming at the company and you should protect your interests. I set down the Campbell Industries file I'd been reviewing. What kind of changes? I can't say much, but not everyone on the board agrees with recent personnel decisions. Some of us remember who actually brought in the Morrison Hotels account. Who saved Campbell Industries from walking away. Dennis, are you trying to tell me something? He paused long enough that I thought the call had dropped. I'm telling you that workplace relationships that cross professional boundaries concern the board. Especially when they affect company performance and shareholder value. Document everything, Aurora. Everything. I already am. Good. And Aurora? You might want to review the company's ethics policy, particularly the section about disclosure of intimate relationships between executives and direct reports. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then at the security badge records showing those late-night office visits. Dennis had just confirmed what the evidence suggested, but my mind had been refusing to process. This wasn't just about professional betrayal or even marital deception. Jasper and Hazel's relationship had crossed lines that could destroy them both. I picked up the Campbell Industries contract, noting Hazel's handwritten margins again. Her notes weren't strategic insights. They were personal reminders. Jay says emphasize innovation. Check with Jay before finalizing. Jay likes this approach. Jay. Not Jasper. Not Mr. Wallace. Just Jay, with a familiarity that predated her promotion by months. The truth wasn't unraveling anymore. It had already unraveled completely, leaving me holding threads of a life I thought I'd understood. But understanding and accepting were different things entirely. And what I'd do with this knowledge? That was another question altogether. The question of what to do with this knowledge kept me awake Sunday night, staring at the ceiling while rain drummed against the windows. By Monday morning I had my answer. If they wanted to play corporate games, I'd show them what happened when they underestimated their opponent. The coffee shop on Burnside was deliberately chosen, far enough from the office district that we wouldn't run into anyone, busy enough that our conversation would disappear into the general noise. Rebecca Chin arrived first, looking polished despite having been unemployed for 4 months since her sudden departure as CFO. She'd lost weight, her suit hanging looser than it should, but her handshake remained firm. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, settling into the corner booth I'd claimed earlier. "When you called, I wondered how long it would take before someone else saw what was happening there." Rebecca wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Let me guess. Jasper finally showed his true colors?" "What do you mean?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The monthly finance meetings that somehow always ran late when his wife was traveling. The suggestions that we discuss budget projections over drinks. The way he'd stand too close when reviewing reports, his hand on my lower back. She met my eyes directly. "I documented everything, Aurora. Every inappropriate comment, every meeting that crossed lines. HR did nothing because Bethany reports to him." My stomach turned, but I kept my expression neutral. "Why didn't you come to me? You were his wife. What was I supposed to say? Your husband keeps trying to corner me in empty conference rooms." She pulled out a flash drive from her purse. "But I kept records. Financial ones too. Hazel's department shows profits on paper, but the actual numbers tell a different story." The flash drive contained spreadsheets that made my evidence look amateur. Hazel had been billing hours to client accounts for work never performed, shifting expenses between departments to hide losses, claiming wins on campaigns that had actually failed. $3 million in fabricated success over 18 months. My second meeting was with Jennifer Park, former head of strategic planning, who'd resigned suddenly 6 months ago. She chose a table near the window, constantly checking the street as if expecting someone to appear. Hazel Morrison is a fraud, she said without preamble. Every successful campaign she's claimed came from someone else. She can't even write a basic creative brief without help. When I pointed this out to Jasper, he suggested I was being territorial. When I provided proof, he said I was creating a hostile work environment. She slid a folder across the table. Email threads showing her incompetence, client complaints about her handling of accounts, and my termination agreement with its very generous silence clause that I'm currently violating. The third meeting almost didn't happen. Sandra Williams, former VP of Operations, initially refused to meet, but when I mentioned Rebecca and Jennifer's names, she agreed. We sat in her car in the parking structure, engine running. I lasted longer than the others because I'm older, less threatening, Sandra said, her voice steady despite her white knuckles on the steering wheel. But when I discovered Hazel was using company credit cards for personal expenses and reported it, Jasper accused me of targeting her due to jealousy. Me, jealous of a woman half my age who can't calculate basic ROI. She handed me a manila envelope. Copies of the credit card statements. Designer clothes, jewelry, weekend trips. All buried in legitimate expense reports. All approved by your husband. By the time I got home, I had enough ammunition to destroy them both. But ammunition without strategy was just noise. I spent the rest of Monday crafting the perfect email to the board, 17 drafts until each word accomplished exactly what I needed. Not accusations but concerns. Not attacks but questions. Professional worry about patterns that might affect shareholder value. The email highlighted correlations without stating causation. Hazel's promotion timeline matched suspicious spending increases. Client retention had dropped 20% since she'd taken on larger responsibilities, but the losses were hidden by redistributing accounts. Employee turnover in the marketing department had tripled, with exit interviews citing leadership concerns that were never addressed. I attached Rebecca's financial analysis, scrubbed of anything that could identify her as the source. The numbers would speak for themselves to anyone who understood basic accounting. Which thankfully the board did even if Jasper assumed they didn't. Tuesday brought an unexpected interruption. Emma stood at my door with her backpack and a concerned expression, having driven up from Eugene without warning. Mom, your texts have been weird. What's going on? I looked at my daughter, 21 years old, with her father's eyes but my determination, and made a decision. Come in. I'll show you. She surveyed the dining room table covered in evidence, the laptop with multiple spreadsheets open, the legal pads filled with timeline notes. Is Dad having an affair? Among other things. With Hazel. She didn't sound surprised. She's always hanging around at family events, laughing too loud at his jokes. Last Thanksgiving she called him Jazzy. I wanted to throw cranberry sauce at her. Why didn't you say anything? Because you seemed happy. Because I thought maybe I was imagining things. He picked up one of the security badge reports. But this isn't imagination, is it? Emma spent the next 3 hours setting up an encrypted email system, a VPN, and secure cloud storage for my documents. Computer science major, remember? She said, typing commands I didn't understand. If you're going to war, at least protect your communications. We worked together until past midnight, mother and daughter united in purpose. She admitted things I hadn't known. How Jasper would diminish my accomplishments at dinners, claiming my strategies were really his ideas simplified for implementation. How he told her boyfriend last Christmas that I was good at execution but needed help with vision. You're the smartest person I know, Mom. He just couldn't stand that you were smarter than him. Wednesday afternoon found me at the grocery store, maintaining the pretense of normalcy by buying wine for book club. My phone rang as I loaded Pinot Grigio into my cart. Marcus Whitman, CEO of Meridian Global, our biggest competitor. Mrs. Wallace? I've been following your situation with interest. We're expanding our marketing division and could use someone with your expertise. I wheeled my cart to the parking lot, rain starting to fall as I found my car. How did you? Portland's business community is smaller than you think. Word travels when talent becomes available. I'm offering you the director position, but that's just the start. Bring me 3 major accounts and I'll make you VP within 6 months. Standing in that parking lot, rain streaming down my windshield, I negotiated the kind of package I'd never have dared ask for at Jasper's company. Signing bonus, equity shares, and yes, The ability to approach select clients about transitioning their accounts. I'll take it, I said, watching the rain wash everything clean. Excellent. Can you start Monday? Absolutely. The fuse was lit. The email to the board would go out Thursday night. My resignation letter was already drafted. The evidence was backed up in 3 locations. All that remained was watching it burn. Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., I hit send on the email to the board members, then closed my laptop and went to bed. There was nothing more to do but wait. The fuse had been lit, and by Monday morning, the explosion would be impossible to ignore. I woke at 6 a.m. to 17 text messages. Timothy's came in rapid succession starting at 7:43. Emergency board meeting called. Jasper looks like he hasn't slept. Linda just walked out. What is happening? Linda Martinez had been Jasper's executive assistant for 3 years, the kind of unflappable professional who could handle any crisis with calm efficiency. According to Timothy's breathless updates, she'd been called into the boardroom at 8 a.m., questioned about the security badge records, and asked to explain the numerous late-night office entries. She'd stood up, removed her company badge, placed it on the table, and walked out without saying a word. Her silence said everything. By 9 a.m., more texts flooded in from contacts throughout the building. The board had been sequestered for 2 hours. Hazel had been seen crying in the bathroom. Bethany from HR was frantically making phone calls from the lobby because she'd been locked out of the executive conference room. I made coffee in my kitchen, Emma still asleep upstairs, and opened my laptop to execute Phase 2. The LinkedIn article I'd been refining for days was ready. When Merit Meets Politics, a case study in corporate leadership failure. No names, no company identifiers, just a carefully crafted analysis of what happens when personal relationships override professional judgment in executive decisions. I published it at exactly noon when I knew most professionals would be checking their feeds during lunch. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 30 minutes, 47 comments had appeared. Women shared stories of being passed over for less qualified male colleagues. Men described watching incompetent friends of leadership get promoted while real talent walked out the door. The comment thread became a collective therapy session for everyone who'd ever been professionally betrayed. But at 2:17 p.m. the comment that mattered most appeared. Robert Campbell, CEO of Campbell Industries, our most valuable client, wrote simply, "Leadership transitions should never compromise project continuity or client relationships. Concerned about recent changes affecting our account management. Would appreciate direct communication from Aurora Wallace regarding our ongoing campaigns." My phone rang within minutes. Robert's direct line. "Aurora, I just learned about your departure. This is unacceptable. You're the only reason we've stayed with that company. We've invested $2 million based on strategies you developed. I understand your concerns, Robert. The transition happened quickly. There is no transition. Hazel Morrison called me this morning claiming she'd been managing our account all along. She couldn't answer basic questions about our target demographics. She didn't even know we'd shifted our focus to the Southwest market last quarter. I'm sure she'll get up to speed quickly," I said, maintaining professional neutrality while knowing Hazel couldn't get up to speed on a stationary bicycle. "We need you, Aurora. If you're available for independent consulting, Campbell Industries would like to retain your services immediately. I've actually accepted a position with Meridian Global. I start Monday." There was a pause, then a laugh. Marcus Whitman finally got smart. Good for him. And good for us. We'll be reaching out to Meridian about transitioning our account. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd anticipated. By 3 p.m., Hazel had sent a company-wide email that would become legendary for its complete lack of self-awareness. She claimed credit for the Campbell Industries relationship, the Morrison Hotel's crisis resolution, and 3 other major wins that had my digital fingerprints all over them. What she didn't realize was that I'd already forwarded the original project files, complete with metadata showing creation dates and revision histories, to those very clients that morning. Morrison Hotels called Jasper directly at 3:45. Timothy, who sat near Jasper's office, texted me fragments of the conversation he could hear through the door. "No, sir, I understand your concerns. Yes, Aurora was integral. We can ensure continuity. Please don't make any hasty decisions." Sterling Communications followed at 4:15. Then Pinnacle Brands at 4:42. 3 major accounts threatening to walk, each worth millions in annual revenue. Each specifically citing concerns about losing their primary strategic contact. Me. Emma came downstairs around 4, finding me at the dining table surrounded by contracts from Meridian and resignation paperwork for Jasper's company. "The internet is loving your article," she said, showing me her phone. "It's been shared 800 times. Someone started a hashtag merit over politics. I didn't mean to start a movement." "Maybe not, but you're giving people permission to tell their own stories. That matters, Mom." At 6:27 I heard Jasper's car in the driveway. Emma looked at me questioning. "Want me to leave?" "Stay. Witness this." He came through the door like a hurricane that had exhausted itself, all spent fury and depleted energy. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, his face the gray color of someone watching their world collapse in real time. He didn't acknowledge Emma, just focused on me with desperate intensity. "Aurora, we need to talk." "We're talking. Privately." "Emma stays. She should know who her father really is." He glanced at our daughter, then back to me. "Fine. The board is conducting a full investigation. Linda quit. 3 clients are threatening to leave. You've destroyed everything we built." "Everything you built?" "I have 8 months of documentation proving I built it while you were busy doing whatever you were doing with Hazel at 11 p.m. on Saturdays." His face went white. "That's not. I have the security records, Jasper. The expense reports. The emails where you called me too emotionally invested, while planning to hand my job to your girlfriend." "She's not." "Stop." I pulled out a manila folder, Catherine Volkov's article printed and highlighted. "This publishes tomorrow. Business Pacific Quarterly. 17 employees, all quoted anonymously describing the toxic culture you created. Rebecca Chen's mysterious departure. Jennifer Park's sudden resignation. Sandra Williams's silence agreement. It's all here." He sank into a chair, scanning the pages. Each highlighted quote made him flinch. A culture where personal relationships determined professional advancement. Female executives pushed out for questioning incompetent leadership. Expense irregularities overlooked when the right person was involved. "They can't publish this. I'll sue." "With what money?" "Once the board sees the financial documents Rebecca provided, you'll be too busy defending yourself to sue anyone." "You vindictive." "Careful," Emma interrupted, her voice steel. "That's my mother you're about to insult. The woman who saved your company while you were playing executive with your side piece." He looked between us, perhaps finally understanding that he'd lost more than just a corporate game. "Aurora, please. I'll give you the promotion. 50% raise. Hazel will be gone by tomorrow." I stood, gathering my papers. "I've already accepted a position with Meridian Global. Director of Strategic Marketing. They're also interested in acquiring several of your clients who've expressed concern about their current account management." "You can't do that. Non-compete clause. The one my lawyer says is unenforceable since you violated the company's ethics policy? That non-compete clause." He had nothing left to say. The man who'd always had an answer, an excuse, a deflection, sat silent in the ruins of his own making. Emma and I left him there, walking upstairs to pack the rest of my things. Tomorrow Catherine's article would hit newsstands. Wednesday I'd start at Meridian. By Friday, Campbell Industries would officially transition their account. The dominoes hadn't just fallen. They'd created a pattern that spelled out exactly who was responsible for their collapse. Emma and I packed the last box in silence, the sound of tape sealing cardboard echoing through the empty bedroom. The house felt hollow already, 12 years of memories boxed and labeled, ready for transport to separate futures. As we carried boxes to the rental truck, neither of us looked back at the home where our family had pretended to thrive while slowly decomposing from the inside. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright, the kind of Portland spring day that made everything feel possible. The Meridian Global building rose 30 floors of gleaming glass and steel in the Pearl District, a testament to what competent leadership could build. My new assistant, David Park, met me in the lobby with a genuine smile and a tablet full of the day's priorities. "Ms. Wallace, welcome to Meridian. Your office is ready on the 22nd floor. Corner suite with a view of Mount Hood on clear days." The elevator ride felt like ascending to a different life. When the doors opened, Marcus Whitman stood waiting, coffee in hand. Aurora, perfect timing. Campbell Industries signed their contract this morning. They specifically stipulated that you personally oversee all strategic initiatives. Robert Campbell called you irreplaceable. My office was everything my old cubicle wasn't. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that belonged in an architecture magazine, and a sitting area for client meetings. On the desk sat a nameplate. Aurora Wallace, Director of Strategic Marketing. No one's wife. No one's afterthought. Just my name and my achievement. I sat in the leather chair, running my fingers across the smooth desk surface and pulled off my wedding ring. The thin band of white skin underneath looked vulnerable, unprotected. I placed the ring in the top drawer, next to a photo Emma had insisted I bring. Just the two of us at her high school graduation, both laughing at something off camera. No Jasper. No pretense. Just us. 3 more clients called this morning, David informed me, setting down a list. Morrison Hotels wants to discuss transitioning their account. Sterling Communications is ready to sign. Pinnacle Brands requested a proposal by Friday. Tuesday morning I arrived early to find my email flooded with messages. The Business Pacific quarterly article had published online at midnight, and print copies were hitting newsstands across Portland. Catherine Volkov had crafted a masterpiece of investigative journalism that never mentioned names but painted a picture so clear that everyone in our industry knew exactly who and what she was describing. The article detailed a prominent Portland marketing executive whose incompetence was hidden by taking credit for others' work, supported by a company president who valued personal relationships over performance. 17 anonymous employees described a culture of fear, favoritism, and failure disguised as success. The financial analysis, carefully sourced from internal documents, showed a pattern of deception that bordered on fraud. My phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues sending gratitude and support. Competitors offering positions. Clients confirming their decision to follow me to Meridian. But the message that stopped me cold came from Bethany in HR. Aurora, I'm deeply sorry for my role in what happened. I knew it was wrong but was too afraid of losing my job to speak up. You deserved better. If you have any advice for someone trying to leave a toxic situation, I would be grateful. I wrote back carefully, document everything. Find a labor attorney. Don't sign anything without legal review. You know the truth, use it to protect yourself and others. Good luck. Wednesday evening, Emma drove up from Eugene to help me move into my new apartment. It was smaller than the house, a 2-bedroom in the Alberta Arts District, but every square foot was mine. We hung my awards on the living room wall. Employee of the Quarter plaques that Jasper had relegated to the garage, certificates of achievement he'd said made the house look cluttered. This place already feels more like home, Emma said, unpacking kitchen boxes. No pretending. No walking on eggshells. Just you being you. We sat on the floor eating Chinese takeout from paper containers, surrounded by boxes and bubble wrap, when Emma set down her chopsticks with unusual deliberation. Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm changing my name. What do you mean? I'm taking your maiden name. Wallace. I've already started the paperwork. She met my eyes directly. I don't want to carry the name of a man who could betray you like that. I want the name of the woman who stood up and fought back. The woman who built something from ashes. My throat tightened. Emma, he's still your father. Biologically, yes. But you're my role model. You're the parent who taught me that integrity matters more than convenience, that truth matters more than comfort. I want to be Emma Wallace. Thursday's lunch with Catherine Volkov was supposed to be celebratory. Her article had already been picked up by 3 national publications, and she was writing a follow-up about women rebuilding after professional betrayal. We sat at a riverside restaurant watching boats navigate the Willamette, when the courier appeared. Aurora Wallace? He handed me an envelope that I recognized immediately. Legal documents. Divorce papers. Catherine started to excuse herself, but I waved her to stay. You might as well witness this. It's part of the story. The papers were straightforward. Jasper wanted a quick, quiet dissolution. He'd keep the house, I'd keep my retirement accounts. The prenup I'd insisted on 12 years ago, despite his protests that it showed a lack of trust, protected my inheritance and future earnings. His company's stock, which had dropped 15% since Tuesday's article, would be divided according to our original agreement. Most of his net worth had evaporated with the company's plummeting valuation. I signed every page without hesitation, using the same confident signature I'd used that morning on 3 new client contracts worth $8 million in annual revenue. Any regrets? Catherine asked gently. I looked at my bare ring finger, at the divorce papers that would end 12 years of marriage, at my new business card that represented a fresh beginning. Regret suggests I'd do something differently. Every choice led me here, to a corner office, loyal clients, and a daughter who's proud to share my name. The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. That evening, I stood at my new apartment window, watching the sun set over Portland's skyline. My phone showed 17 new client inquiries, a meeting request from the mayor's office about leading a women's professional development initiative, and a text from Emma. Proud of you, Mom. The Wallace women don't just survive. We thrive. The city lights began to twinkle as darkness fell, and I realized I wasn't watching the end of something. I was watching the beginning. The phoenix had risen and she was just getting started. The night stretched ahead of me, Portland's lights creating constellations against the darkness. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and headed home to my apartment where no one would judge my success or diminish my achievements. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new victories. But tonight I would simply be Aurora Wallace, a woman who had rebuilt herself from betrayal into something stronger. 6 months passed in a blur of successes that felt earned rather than stolen. The Pacific Northwest Marketing Summit invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, requesting me as their keynote speaker for the annual conference. 3,000 industry professionals would gather to hear about innovation, leadership, and building ethical corporate cultures. They wanted me to address the topic of transparent meritocracies in modern business. Standing backstage at the convention center, I adjusted my microphone and watched the previous speaker wrap up. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see the audience filling the auditorium. And there, 7 rows back on the left side, sat Jasper. His hair had gone gray at the temples, his suit hung loose on a frame that had lost weight, and his posture carried the defeat of someone who'd lost everything they'd built on lies. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed, please welcome Aurora Wallace, Chief Marketing Officer of Meridian Global. The applause carried me onto the stage, where 3,000 faces turned toward me with expectation. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see individual expressions, but I knew Jasper was watching. I could feel his presence like a stone in my shoe, noticeable but no longer painful. 2 years ago, I began, my voice steady and clear, I believed that hard work guaranteed recognition, that excellence would always triumph over politics, that the people closest to us would champion our success rather than steal it. I paused, letting the words settle. I was wrong. And that painful lesson taught me something invaluable. Meritocracy isn't something that happens naturally. It's something we build, protect, and defend every single day. For 45 minutes, I laid out the blueprint for creating corporate cultures where talent thrived and politics died. I shared case studies from Meridian's success, the 3 companies that had followed me and flourished, the employees who'd finally received recognition for their contributions. I never mentioned Jasper or his company by name, but everyone in that room knew the story behind the success. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. As I left the stage, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I recognized Jasper's new phone immediately. Aurora, please. 5 minutes. I need to explain. I deleted it without responding. 3 days later, Marcus Whitman called me into his office. Aurora, I have an unusual situation. We've been approached about acquiring Cascade Marketing. He paused, watching my face. Jasper's company. The irony was perfect. The company that had denied me a raise, that had given my position to someone unqualified, was now bleeding money and desperate for a buyer. Marcus slid a folder across his desk. The board wants you to lead the acquisition team. You know their assets better than anyone. The conference room hadn't changed. Same mahogany table, same leather chairs, same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Portland. But this time I sat at the head of the table, Meridian's legal team flanking me, while Jasper and what remained of his board sat like defendants awaiting sentencing. The terms are non-negotiable, I began, opening the acquisition folder. Meridian will absorb your remaining profitable accounts. We'll honor existing client contracts but under new management. As for personnel, I pulled out 2 termination agreements. These positions are redundant. Hazel Morrison's name topped the first document. According to my sources, she'd been freelancing for small businesses, barely making rent on a studio apartment in Gresham. Her LinkedIn profile showed a string of short-term contracts, none lasting more than 3 months. Jasper's name was on the second. His CEO position would be eliminated immediately, with a modest severance that would barely cover 6 months of expenses. The prenup had protected my assets, but the company's collapse had destroyed his. The house was in foreclosure. His car had been repossessed. The man who'd once laughed at my raise request was now facing financial ruin. I signed both termination papers with the same pen I'd used to pack my desk that Thursday afternoon when everyone thought I was just another discarded employee. The ink flowed smooth and final. Aurora, Jasper's voice cracked. Can we discuss? The terms are final. Legal will handle the transition. I stood, gathering my documents. This meeting is concluded. That evening, my mother Helen arrived from Seattle for my official installation ceremony as CMO. We had dinner at Le Pigeon, Portland's finest restaurant, where she raised her champagne glass with a knowing smile. I never liked him, she said simply. Even at your wedding something felt off. The way he always had to be the center of attention, always had to diminish your accomplishments to elevate his own. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? Sometimes we need to learn our own lessons, darling. But I knew you'd figure it out. You've always been stronger than you realized. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I suspected the affair, you know. The way that Hazel woman looked at him during your birthday dinner last year. Like a predator marking territory. And you said nothing? I trusted you to handle it your way. And look what you've built from those ashes. You didn't just survive, Aurora. You conquered. The next morning I arrived at my office at 5:30 a.m., my old routine transformed but intact. The sunrise painted Mount Hood in shades of gold and pink, a view Jasper's office had never offered. On my desk lay expansion plans for the 3 companies that had followed me from Cascade Marketing to Meridian. Campbell Industries had tripled their marketing budget. Morrison Hotels had launched a nationwide campaign that was already winning awards. Sterling Communications had gone public with a valuation that made early investors wealthy. I'd built an empire from the ruins of betrayal. Not through destruction or petty vengeance, but through excellence that couldn't be denied or stolen. Every success was earned, documented, and credited properly. Every achievement belonged to those who'd actually achieved it. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Jasper had updated his profile, seeking new opportunities in consulting. The same platform where he'd once announced my replacement now broadcast his professional collapse. I closed the notification and opened my presentation for the morning's board meeting. 3 new clients were ready to sign. 2 more companies wanted to discuss partnerships, and Emma would be joining the team as a junior strategist after graduation. The Wallace women were building something that would last longer than any marriage, any betrayal, any attempt to diminish our light. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about the titles others gave you or the raises they denied. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise. The board meeting presentation went flawlessly, with 3 new clients signing contracts worth $12 million in combined annual revenue. As I walked back to my office, the morning sun illuminated the Meridian Global lobby's marble floors, and I caught my reflection in the polished elevator doors. The woman staring back wore confidence like a tailored suit, earned through trials that would have broken someone weaker. 1 year. That's all it had taken to transform Meridian's marketing division from a competent department into an industry powerhouse. The numbers spoke louder than any promotion speech I'd ever prepared. Revenue had tripled. Client retention sat at 97%. Employee satisfaction scores in my division topped the company charts. Marcus Whitman called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 year after that devastating promotion meeting. Aurora, the board met yesterday. Unanimous decision. They want you as our newest director. Youngest woman ever appointed to this position in Meridian's 40-year history. I stood in his corner office looking out at the city below. From here I could see the building where I'd once begged for basic recognition, now dwarfed by Meridian's tower. I accept, I said simply, no elaborate speech needed. My work had already said everything. The following Monday, Emma walked into my office wearing her cap and gown, holding her diploma from the University of Oregon. Summa cum laude in marketing and communications, with a thesis on ethical leadership in modern corporations that her professors called groundbreaking. She'd driven straight from her graduation ceremony to accept her position as junior analyst on my team. "Ready to get to work, Ms. Wallace?" I asked, using her chosen name with pride. "Ready to learn from the best, Ms. Wallace," she replied, setting her diploma on my desk. "Where do we start?" "Morrison Hotels. They're launching a European expansion and I want fresh eyes on the campaign. Your perspective matters here, Emma. Not because you're my daughter, but because you've earned this position through your own merit." We worked side by side that afternoon, her natural talent evident in every suggestion she made. She'd inherited my attention to detail but brought her own creative vision that surprised and delighted our clients. When she presented her initial concepts to the Morrison Hotels team via video conference, they immediately approved her direction. No one mentioned she was my daughter. They saw only a brilliant young strategist who understood their brand. 3 weeks later, at the Western Marketing Alliance conference in Seattle, I was reviewing my keynote notes in the speaker's lounge when I heard a familiar voice at the registration desk. Jasper stood there, fumbling with his credit card trying to pay the late registration fee. His suit was off the rack, his shoes scuffed, his entire demeanor that of someone trying to maintain appearances on a shoestring budget. "I'm sorry, sir, but your card was declined," the registration attendant said quietly. "Try it again. There must be a mistake." I watched him pull out another card, then another. Each rejection made his shoulders drop further. His consulting firm, according to industry gossip, consisted of him and 2 junior contractors working out of a shared workspace in the suburbs. His biggest client was a chain of local mattress stores. I could have walked away, let him struggle with the embarrassment. Instead, I approached the desk. "Put Mr. Wallace's registration on Meridian's corporate account," I told the attendant. Jasper turned, his face cycling through surprise, shame, and something that might have been gratitude. "Aurora, It's Ms. Wallace," I corrected gently but firmly. "Enjoy the conference." I walked away before he could respond. Later, during my keynote on building sustainable success through authentic leadership, I saw him in the back row, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When our eyes met briefly, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual pain. Just the neutral acknowledgement of shared history that no longer defined me. After my presentation, a young woman approached me, waiting until the crowd of well-wishers dispersed. She looked about 25, sharp-eyed but exhausted, carrying herself with the particular weight of someone enduring professional injustice. "Ms. Wallace? I'm Grace Thompson. I work at Bradley Marketing and I'm experiencing something similar to what you went through. My manager is taking credit for my campaigns while actively sabotaging my advancement. HR won't help because he's the CEO's golf buddy. I don't know what to do." I led her to a quiet corner of the convention center, away from the networking chaos. "Tell me everything." For 30 minutes, Grace outlined systematic theft of her work, gaslighting about her contributions, and a toxic environment that was destroying her confidence. It was my story with different names, different details, but the same fundamental injustice. "Everyone says I should fight it out, prove my worth, show them they're wrong," Grace said, tears threatening to spill. "But I'm exhausted. Can I tell you something I learned the hard way?" I pulled out my business card and a pen. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not in defeat but as strategy. The energy you're spending trying to convince people who refuse to see your value, that same energy could build something extraordinary somewhere else." I wrote a note on the back of my card. "This is Marcus Whitman's direct line at Meridian. Tell him I recommended you. We have an opening in our digital division that would be perfect for someone with your skills." But what about my current job? Won't leaving look like failure? Failure is staying where you're not valued. Success is recognizing your worth and finding, or creating, environments that celebrate it. I handed her the card. "And Grace, document everything before you leave. Not for revenge but for protection. Truth has a way of surfacing when the time is right." 2 hours later, I sat in my hotel room video calling Emma, who was working late on the Morrison Hotels presentation. "Mom, I just got an email from Robert Campbell himself. He said our European campaign concept is exactly what they've been searching for. He wants to increase the budget by 30%. That's your success, Emma. Own it. I learned from the best. Not just about marketing but about standing tall even when people try to make you small. As we talked, I looked out at Seattle's skyline, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in this city, Grace Thompson was probably making plans to leave her toxic workplace. Emma was building her career on a foundation of merit and integrity. My mother was telling her book club about her daughter, the CMO and board director. The woman who'd walked out of that conference room with a box of belongings and a heart full of betrayal had transformed into something more powerful than I'd ever imagined. Not through bitterness or revenge, but through the simple act of refusing to accept less than I deserved. I opened my laptop to review the recommendation letter I'd written for Grace, ensuring it captured her potential while carefully avoiding any mention of her current situation. As I signed it with my digital signature, I realized this was my true legacy. Not the titles or the revenue or even the vindication. It was the chain of women I could help climb out of toxic situations, teaching them that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. Sometimes it's building something so magnificent that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. If this story of corporate revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Aurora handed Jasper the printed article from Catherine Volkov, watching his face pale as he realized his empire was crumbling. What was your favorite moment of justice? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.